in the beautiful life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we're at a very difficult and trying time. And a time that is a test. And that is a great lesson for us, because we as Muslims will go through life and will go through tests. That's what this life is about. Nobody's going to go through this life and just, no fights and no arguments and husband wife are all lovey-dovey and no kid problems and no sickness. It's just not the way this life works. So how to handle yourselves in such situations and how to cling to the deen, to the Quran and the Sunnah in such situations. That's why we have such a beautiful example in front of us, the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Recently I was in a discussion online, it was like a podcast with a person, inshallah you will see it soon. He's a well-known YouTube personality, not Muslim yet, inshallah. One of the things he asked me was, how do you look at the life of the Prophet ﷺ being such a perfect example in comparison to other prophets? And I told him, when you look at Isa ibn Maryam, Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, at a very young age, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lifted him to himself. And not that he died, but he was lifted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we didn't see his interactions with a wife or children. He didn't have a government to run. He didn't have an army to run. He didn't have people attacking and having to defend cities. But this is the beautiful thing about the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he went through all those halat, all those different conditions. So if we are leaders of countries, we have an example in Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If we are fathers, if we are children, if we are brothers, we have an example in Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And a beautiful example for our sisters is in the wives of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and in the daughters of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that you could not have with Isa ibn Maryam. He was never married. And inshallah he will get married when he comes back, but till he was taken up by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he didn't have any children. So in the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, we have a full example. Here, after 3 harsh years of the boycott, and it was a very trying time. The boycott had a health effect on the Muslims. Imagine you have no food, you have no trade, you're eating palm tree leaves. Like that's how desperate of a situation the Muslims were in. For not a month, not a day, 3 years. Malnutrition, no trade, psychologically, imagine your own families aren't talking to you, you can't trade, your business is hurt. And not just for the Muslims, but those who stood with the Muslims, like Abu Talib. It was a harsh time, a difficult time that he went through. So from that, he had a great health effect. And from that he became ill. And no doubt he was older in age anyway. So here he became ill, and they were afraid that this was going to be his death. Now this is very important. This verse is very important. Pay close attention. Here now you have 2 competing forces. And those same 2 competing forces are in your life today. The seerah should not be an entertainment or just history. This should be something that you derive your life lessons from. So here, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, the force of good, the light of guidance, the one who was sent by Allah to be a means of guidance for mankind, he goes to his uncle Abu Talib here to invite him towards good. To invite him towards what? Towards Al-Jannah, towards Tawheed, towards Khair, towards all that is good. But at the same time, the forces of shaitan are there. And the forces of shaitan are not Iblis sitting with a spear in his hand, like the movies and things. No. Shaitan's number one supporters are the shayateen min al-ins. Those people, evil, that are in my life and your life, that want to call you towards haram, that want to try to put shak and shubuhat in your mind. So here you had two of the, at the time, leaders of Quraysh, and they were there. One of them being the infamous Abu Jahl, Abu al-Hakam as he was called. But we know him to be the father of ignorance, Abu Jahl. And then you had Abdullah ibn Umayyah. Abdullah ibn Umayyah. In some of the Kutub al-Tariq it has him as Abdullah ibn Abi Umayyah. But in Sahih Muslim the Riwayah mentions him as Abdullah ibn Umayyah. Abdullah ibn Umayyah and Abu Jahl, they took the seats closest to Abu Talib. So when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came, he didn't find a place to sit close. He had to sit across. And this riwayah is in Sahih Muslim. In the seerah, we're going to depend upon Sahih ahadith because there is a lot of weak narrations. We're going to leave those aside. And if there is any weakness in the narration, I will mention them to you. I think that somebody's opened up a... So here you have Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sitting, and you have next to Abu Talib, Abu Jahl and Abdullah ibn Umayyah. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is sent as a mercy to mankind. So as a mercy, he starts to invite his uncle towards Tawheed. And this is an important ahadith. This is in Sahih Muslim, so you should know, because some people, out of their ghulu, either out of an exaggeration or their political motives, they try to make Abu Talib out to be a Muslim. They try to make Abdul Muttalib a Muslim. They try to make Abdullah and Amina, the parents of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to be Muslims, but we go by what is in the evidence. So here in Sahih Muslim, here Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells him, Ya Ammi, O my uncle, قل لا إله إلا الله. Say La ilaha illallah. Kalimatan. This is a statement that if you make it, Ashhadu biha inda Allah, I will bear a witness for you in front of Allah. This is very important. Earlier, we have some narrations where Abu Talib talks about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and tells his comrades from the Quraysh, the other chiefs, that look, if he wasn't a true prophet, how would he know this? How would he know that, right? And some of the people of bid'ah, they take those narrations, they say, oh, see, he believed in Rasulullah being a prophet, so he was Muslim. No. Many of the Quraysh realized the Prophet was on the truth. And many of them, they would tell him, don't make dua against us. And Fir'aun, he told Musa alayhi salam, make dua to Allah to stop these punishments. He realized he was not. But just that realization is not enough. You have to accept it. Biqubul, with acceptance. With taslim, with submission. And if those narrations were an indication that he was Muslim, then why would Rasulullah tell him, say La ilaha illallah? This is a Sahih Muslim. It's not like, we're basing it on some da'if ahadith. Here Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam telling his uncle, just say La ilaha illallah, accept my nabuwwat, accept this so that I can be a witness for you on the day of judgment in front of Allah. Because even Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam does not have the right to take anybody out of the nar. And it is the right of Allah. He can make shifa, He can intercede for the believers, not for the non-believers. Here, Abu Jahl, he told him that, are you going to leave an al-millat al-Abd al-Muttalib? Are you going to leave upon the nation or the methodology or the belief of Abdul Muttalib? Now here you have a force of good. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam telling him, say La ilaha illallah. And then you have the force of evil telling him, what about your nationalism? What about your pride? Now there are a couple of lessons to take here. One, those that say Abdul Muttalib was Muslim, if he was Muslim, then why would tell him, why are you leaving his nation? Obviously he was not Muslim, and that's why they were telling him not to accept Islam and stay on the religion of Abdul Muttalib. Secondly, here we find a very important distinction between accepting the truth and accepting peer pressure. Now here you have Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam giving him da'wah towards the haqq, towards the truth. And you have Abu Jahl and Abdullah ibn Umayyah giving da'wah, or putting that peer pressure, you could say, upon nationalism, to leave the haqq,